The old world of corporate America was about to be turned upside down. A storm was coming, but nobody saw it coming. Nobody ever does. Clara moved with the quiet grace of a predator in disguise, pushing her cleaning cart through the polished halls of the Sterling Corporation. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent observer in a world that saw her as nothing more than a janitor. But they were wrong. So very wrong. She was the owner of the very building they stood in, the sole proprietor of the company they worked for. A few months ago, when the company was on the brink of collapse, she had swooped in and bought it, a silent savior watching her new acquisition from the inside. From her vantage point, a humble cleaning cart, she watched the executives in their expensive suits. They were busy, preoccupied with a strategy to cut costs and streamline the company. They were debating which departments to downsize and how to present the inevitable layoffs as a necessary evil. The discussions were brutal, cold, and dehumanizing. But what truly struck her was not the financial numbers or market shares, but the blatant disregard for the very people who built the company. The men in suits saw the employees as numbers on a spreadsheet, not as human beings. It was this toxic culture that had led the once thriving tech giant to its knees. Clara, a self-made woman who had started with nothing, had a different perspective. She had built her empire from the ground up, a testament to her resilience and perseverance. She knew the importance of humility and the power of silent observation. That's why she had decided to go undercover as a janitor. 2 weeks into her role, she had seen enough to confirm her suspicions. The casual racism and mockery she endured daily were a symptom of a much deeper illness. The employees, from the executives to the administrative assistants, saw her as invisible, a person without a voice or a mind. "We can't keep paying for this comprehensive benefits package," a senior executive, a tall man with an arrogant smirk, said. "If we cut 20% of the lowest level staff, we can save enough to keep the board happy for another quarter." A few people nodded in agreement. Her heart sank. This was the same old song and dance she had heard 1,000 times before. It was a short-term fix that would only lead to long-term decline. These janitors, a mid-level manager named Mark Hastings muttered, rolling his eyes as he looked at her. "We could probably cut them, too. I mean, do we really need so many?" Clara's face remained impassive. She had endured worse than this, but it still astonished her how easily some people could dehumanize others. Her mission was to understand the company's real problems, not just from a spreadsheet or management report, but from the ground up. In the break room later that day, she overheard a young intern, Tim, joking with his friends. "I don't get why they need so many janitors. My grandma could do this job." He glanced at Clara, who was quietly drinking coffee from a cracked mug, and added, "I bet she doesn't even speak English." Laughter erupted from the group. The insults, the contempt, the complete and utter disregard for her humanity, it all fueled a fire within her. They saw a janitor. She saw a ticking time bomb. They were too self-absorbed to see that the woman they were mocking was the one who held their professional lives in her hands. The next morning, the air in the office was heavy with tension. Rumors of layoffs were spreading like wildfire, and employees were on edge. Clara, in her janitor's uniform, felt a new sense of urgency. The time for observation was over. The time for action was at hand. She pushed her cleaning cart toward the main conference room, where the executives were already gathering for a board meeting. This meeting, she knew, would seal the company's fate. They would once again propose a plan of mass layoffs and budget cuts, a strategy that would only accelerate the company's downfall. Mark Hastings, as boisterous as ever, was holding court in the center of the room. "We're going to have to make some tough decisions today," he said with a smirk. but it's for the good of the company. It's time to shed some dead weight. Dead weight, she thought, as she wiped down the conference table. That's what they considered their employees to be. Expendable. She clenched her jaw. She wouldn't stay silent this time. The meeting began. The CEO, Richard Owens, a grim-faced man at the head of the table, outlined the company's bleak future. Our projections are worse than we expected, he said. We need to cut costs across the board. That means massive layoffs. The executives began to bicker, each proposing a different version of the same flawed solution. Nobody mentioned innovation or investing in people. It was all about cutting corners and saving their own skins. I suggest we start with the administrative staff, one executive said. We can cut their numbers by at least 25%. We can completely outsource the cleaning staff, Mark Hastings chimed in. There's no need to have them on staff when we can get the same work done for half the cost. Clara had heard enough. She put down her mop and walked to the head of the table, standing next to Richard Owens. She tapped him lightly on the shoulder. Excuse me, she said in a clear, firm voice. I think it's time for me to speak. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. What are you doing? Mark Hastings demanded, his tone condescending. This is a private meeting. You don't belong in here. Clara didn't react to his tone. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were the ownership documents for the Sterling Corporation. I think you'll find that I have every right to be here, she said calmly, handing the envelope to Richard Owens. From this day forward, I'll be the one making the decisions that shape this company's future. Owens's face went pale as he read the documents. He looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real, Clara replied, her voice now addressing everyone in the room. I've owned this company for weeks, and I've been watching, listening, and learning. I've heard enough to know that the decisions you've been making are destroying it from the inside. The room erupted into chaos. The executives shouted over each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. Mark Hastings was the loudest, his face red with anger. You can't do this. You're a janitor. He yelled, jumping to his feet. Clara turned to him, her gaze cold and unwavering. I'm not just anyone. I'm the woman who now controls your job, your salary, and the future of this company. And I'm going to make sure that people like you, who think they can belittle others with impunity, are held accountable. The room fell silent once more as the full weight of her words settled in. Clara took her place at the head of the table. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. The executives who once held all the power were now scrambling to save their jobs. Clara, however, was not interested in maintaining the old order. She was here to rebuild the company from the ground up, to create a place where every employee, regardless of their position, was treated with respect and dignity. She started with Mark Hastings. Looking at him with a chilling calmness, she said, "You're fired. Security will escort you out immediately." Hastings's face went white. He was a man who, just minutes ago, had held the power of a company's future in his hands. Now, he was nothing. He was just another person who underestimated the cleaning lady. With a final, incredulous look, he was escorted from the room. A tangible silence hung in the air. Now, Clara said, her voice cutting through the tense silence, let's talk about the future of this company. Over the next hour, she laid out her vision, a restructuring plan that would focus on innovation and investing in the very employees the executives had so easily dismissed. She spoke of growth, sustainability, and a new corporate culture where everyone was valued. By the end of the meeting, several more executives, those who had enabled the toxic culture, had been quietly fired. Clara's message was clear. She was here to transform the company, not just manage its decline. As she walked through the empty corridors that night, the office felt different. Quieter. Calmer. She knew there was still much work to be done, but she had taken the first step. For the first time in weeks, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had endured the humiliation and disrespect, and it had all been worth it. She had seen the true nature of the people who once held power in this company, and she had proved to herself that she had the strength to succeed. A few days later, sitting in her new office, she looked at the stack of folders on her desk, each representing a new opportunity for the company. There was a knock on the door. It was a young woman, a new janitor. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said nervously. "I've never worked at a place where people like me were treated with such respect." Clara smiled, her heart full. "You're welcome. And remember, everyone here deserves respect, no matter what their job is." The woman nodded and left. Clara leaned back in her chair, a deep sense of satisfaction washing over her. The work was just beginning, but she knew that together, they would build something truly great. And this time, nobody would be left behind.